WWJD, which stands for What Would Jesus Do? Yes, correct. What would Jesus do? So we had these bracelets. Anybody have their bracelet on? Anybody get one? So we still have a few in the back in that little bucket. If you want one, I'll be honest, there's not a lot of color options yet left, Ashley. There are some back there. There's just not a ton of color options. We had a lot and gave them away last week and then on Sunday, so there's not a ton of options left. But if you haven't got one yet, definitely go get one. I was trying to match my shoes this week, but there was no pink ones left. I thought we had some pink ones, but apparently they got them all last week, so I just got bright color. Oh, little trick. If you guys got a bracelet or are getting one, okay? So I'm at that age where things that were cool when I was a kid are coming back in style or have come back in style. So WWJD bracelets were cool when I was a kid. That was like the first time they were cool. I know they've come back and forth in different degrees. But first of all, I got to say this, and maybe I shouldn't because Pastor Dustin is my boss. But he was like, I don't know, I didn't think they were that cool when I was a kid. They were cool, okay? If Pastor Dustin didn't think they were cool, it's probably because he wasn't that cool, so he wasn't like in the group. So I'm just saying, Hannah, when you trim this later, start after that, because I don't want Pastor Dustin to see that. And he's probably not watching because I think they went up to the cabin or something for vacation. So he's not watching this. It's fine. But Allen Iverson wore one on each wrist, and in my mind, Allen Iverson in the 90s was as cool as it can possibly get. So if he wore one, I was like, yes, I want that too. But there's a little trick to these bracelets. If you want to, some people said they want like the little strand like hanging out. That's cool if you want to do that. But I like to hide it. So if you put your bracelet on inside out, like backwards, upside down, and then you do that, and then you flip it over, and you can like hide the little extra flap. That's a free tip for all of you, not even part of my message. But as someone who's been, well, I won't say I've been wearing these for over 20 years, but I definitely wore one over 20 years ago. So back when they were cool the first time. All right, but that's not my message. My message is not just about bracelets, but the bracelets are a great reminder for you on what Jesus did and how you can live your life more like him, but also a good opportunity maybe to share with people when they ask what the bracelet is or start some conversations. So we're doing this series, What Would Jesus Do? Because it's Christmas, right? You guys agree it's Christmas? You guys are excited for the Christmas season? We talk a lot about baby Jesus during the Christmas season, but we don't necessarily talk much about adult Jesus and why he came and what he did while he was here. And so we want to spend some time talking about who Jesus actually is so that then you can, because he came to model a life that we should live, right? To be an example for us, but also to show us the Father. And if you're like, I don't know about God, maybe you've heard he's mean, he's angry, maybe you think he's up in heaven judging you. He's not. Jesus shows us, he says, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. He shows us the heart of the Father as he walks this earth, the way that he interacts with people. That's the heart of God. It's a physical example, and he came as a human, on how God lived. So we started in John 1, verse 1 and verse 14. It says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. 14 says, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. So Jesus was definitely God, no matter what you heard, no matter what some people believe. I know there are other religions that think he was just a good person. He was just a wise teacher, a nice guy, maybe a prophet of God, but not God himself. But that's not true. He was God himself. God, the creator, stepped out of heaven, became his creation, and lived among us as people, right? In Hebrews, it says that he was tempted like everyone else, but without sin. He lived the life that we live. So God is not up in heaven. He's not distant. He's not judging you because of your mistakes or because of the path or the way that you live your life. He is someone who empathizes with you because he also lived this life as a man. That's huge. That's important to understand. He was God, but he came down to meet us, to live this life as a man, to show us the heart of the Father, to show us the way to live, but then ultimately to die, be buried, resurrected, so that we could have that relationship with God again, right? That's what Jesus came to do. And so this series I've been sharing some of my favorite Jesus stories. There's a lot of them, so I don't know how long this series will go. We might get that Pastor Mac anointing and just do a 30-week series that lasts the rest of the year. I don't know. But I want to just share some of my favorite stories about Jesus to show the heart of the Father, right? But then also show us an example of how we can live our lives, right? So the story that I'm talking about today is in Mark 5, 21, verse 42. It's actually in 3 of the 4 Gospels, so it's there a lot. But I like the way that they put it in, that Mark puts it in chapter 5. So I'm going to read this. It's the story of Jairus' daughter and then the woman with the issue of the blood. I don't know if you guys have heard that story or not. Some of you probably have. Maybe you heard it like as a kid, but maybe it's been a while. So to give you a refresher, I'm just going to read this, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about what has kind of stood out to me in this. And this is a great way if you're not super confident in where to start with the Bible. We've talked about that in the last series or 2 series ago. For me, I like to read stories. And I like to take these stories and find out what am I supposed to learn from these stories? What is God telling me in this story? To me, that's just an easier way to break down the Bible. So if you're overwhelmed by everything that's in the Bible, the Gospels have the stories of Jesus. The Old Testament is these stories of God working mightily for his people. That's a great way to start. So I'm going to read Mark 5, 21 through 42. It's a little long. I'm going to read it off the screen instead of my iPad so that I'm not looking straight down. I'm going to get some water because it's a lot to read. All right, let's do this. Mark 5, verse 21. Now when Jesus had crossed over again by boat to the other side, a great multitude gathered to him, and he was by the sea. And behold, one of the rulers of the synagogue came, Jairus by name, and when he saw him, he fell at his feet and begged him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter lies at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, that she may be healed, and she will live." So Jesus went out to him, and a great multitude followed him and thronged him. That's a good word, thronged. Now a certain woman had a flow of blood for 12 years and had suffered many things from many physicians. She had spent all that she had and was no better, but rather grew worse. Let me pause for a second, just because I remember hearing the story as a kid, and I'm like, oh man, how could she go to doctors for 12 years and not find a solution? And then as I got older, I'm like, medicine probably wasn't as good back then as it is now, so I can understand why she went to a lot of different people and they couldn't help. Hopefully in 2023, she probably could get the help that she needs, maybe, but I don't know. In this time, she tried for 12 years, didn't get the help she needed. She had suffered many things from many physicians. She had spent all that she had and was no better, but rather grew worse. Spent all her money trying to find a cure, could not find anything. When she heard about Jesus, remember that, she heard about Jesus, she came behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. For she said, "If only I may touch his clothes, I shall be made well." Immediately, the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of the affliction. And Jesus, immediately knowing in himself that power had gone out of him, turned around in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" But his disciples said to him, "You see the multitude thronging you, and you say, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see her who had done this thing. But the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction." While he was still speaking, some came from the ruler of the synagogue's house who said, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" As soon as Jesus heard the word that was spoken, he said to the ruler of the synagogue, "Do not be afraid, only believe." And he permitted no one follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. And then he came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue and saw a tumult and those who wept and wailed loudly. And when he came in, he said, "Why make this commotion and weep? This child is not dead, but sleeping." And they ridiculed him. But when he had put them all outside, he took the father and the mother of the child and those who were with him and entered where the child was lying. And he took the child by the hand and said to her, "Talitha kumi," I don't know, which is translated, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." Immediately the girl arose and walked, for she was 12 years of age, and they were overcome with great amazement. I think that's it. I would be too. That's pretty amazing, right? That is a fantastic story, and I love this story. Let me point some things out for you in this story. The first thing I'm gonna point out is kind of a free tip, because it's not necessarily Jesus doing something, right? This is what would Jesus do. This is what somebody else did, okay? This is the woman, okay? The first thing, it said she heard of Jesus, and then she believed that he could do something, right? If she touched the hem of his garment, and then she acted. She acted on that belief. So Romans 10:17, you're probably familiar with the verse. It says, so then faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. So you sitting here today, you're hearing the word of God be preached. That's the first thing in any sort of faith, relationship with God, Christianity. The first thing you got to do is hear the word. If you're not hearing the word, if you're not coming to church, if you're not at least, listening to a podcast or talking to, if you're not hearing the word, you're not going to get more faith. You're not going to have belief. The first thing you got to do is hear the word. The second thing, James 2:17 says, thus also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. So she heard about Jesus. So she got belief and then acted on that, right? So this is not like a formula of this is how things happen and you get your healing. But this is what happens. This is how healing comes, not because it's a formula and God says A plus B equals C, but because when you hear about Jesus, then you can get faith and believe. And then your faith is activated by doing something. God's not gonna say, I don't know, God can work in a lot of different ways. You're probably not gonna get anything great from God just sitting there, right? It's great to sit there, it's great to hear something, but if you hear it and you have faith, you'll act on it. And I say that not that oh, I'm telling you, you have faith, but now you need to act. If you have faith, you will act. There is an action that comes with that. It's natural, it's a thing. And honestly, it says faith comes by hearing. It doesn't say you have to work up some faith when you hear. If you don't think you have enough faith, if you have trouble believing the things that God has told you, whether you personally or in his word, if you're like, oh, I hear about healing, but I haven't seen it in my own life, I don't believe, then you need to hear it more. You need to hear until you believe, and you need to hear enough to believe and act, because it's that action is where that comes. That's where the healing can come, is in the action. God is calling you to do stuff, but you have to step out and do something. I'm reminded of the story of Abraham. God said, go to the place that I am telling you to go. He's like, when you get there, I'll let you know. I don't have that kind of faith, I'll be honest with you. I'm like, God, tell me exactly what's gonna happen. But God says, on your way, I'll tell you. When you get there, I'll let you know. So many of us wait and don't act on something because we don't have that next step, because we don't know. But then we don't have faith. We don't believe if we're not acting. There isn't action. If you truly believe, people say, the conversation about grace and works, if you're saved by grace, then do I need to do works? No, but if you truly understand this gift of salvation, you're gonna do works. There's gonna be actions that follow. If Jesus is truly real in your life, if you really have that faith, there's gonna be actions. I don't have to tell you to act on your faith. If you really have that faith, there will be action, and that's when whatever you're trying to get from God comes. He said, your faith has made you well. It's your faith, but it's that acting on that. If you're not acting, you don't have enough faith. And I'm not saying that to judge you, because if you need more faith, then hear more word and get more faith. But if I had faith that I could walk off this stage and just keep walking in the air, I would do it. But I don't believe that I can keep walking. I believe if I step off the stage, I'll fall to the ground, so I'm not gonna do it. But if you truly believe that whatever it is that God has for you, if you truly believe that he's called you to do something, to have something, to be something, then do something. Act on that faith. And if you don't have enough faith to act yet, hear more word. Get in church more, listen to more podcasts, surround yourself with people in your life that are speaking faith into your life. That's a big thing that people don't talk enough about. I think we talk about coming to church and listening to podcasts and hearing sermons, but if you come to church here and you hear a message and you get encouraged, but then you go back and play 9 square and you have some friends that are discouraging you, or you talk with your friends or your family. It's tough. If you don't have a Christian family or a supportive family at home, I'm sorry. Like, I empathize with you. Like, that's tough. I grew up in a Christian home. My parents are very supportive. Some might say to a fault. I'm like, really, Mom? Can I do anything I put my mind to? Can I really? I don't know. I'm not talented enough quite for that. She was the one that was like, even in high school, she was like, you can be in the NBA if you want. I'm like, Mom, I'm 6 foot. I'm not going to get to the NBA. I'm not that good. I don't know. With these shoes, maybe I can, though. I did a test. I am better with these shoes. I know I missed that first shot, but that was a warm-up. I took a second shot later, and it went in. So the shoes make a difference. I think they do make a difference. That's my scientific theory, still working on that. But if you don't have a supportive family at home, the people that are close with you all the time living in your house, I'm sorry, but you need to find supportive people here then. I promise you there are people in this room. I know looking around at some of you, I know some of you are super supportive and will be that for people. But even if you can't find, other youth here that are supporting you, come talk to me. I will support you. I know Jack, Daniel, Trish, some of our leaders, Talia in the back. I know that they support you in what you're trying to do. So please, 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 this has become a long side note, but find people in your life that are going to speak positive, truth, faith-giving words into your life. It's so incredibly important. Okay, that was the first note, right? Starts by hearing. She heard about Jesus, then you believe, then you act on that, and that's when That's when changes happen. The second thing here is Jesus. This is the first note about what Jesus did. But Jesus stopped to see her. Now it says she touched the clothes. She felt she was healed. At the moment, Jesus could have kept walking. Remember, Jesus was on his way to heal someone else. He had a lot going on. There was people all around him. But he stopped to see her and minister to that woman because we serve a God who sees people. And I've said this before from the stage. I probably say it a lot, and I'll continue to say it. We serve a God that sees people. He sees you wherever you're at. And I don't mean that when I was a kid, I took it as like, don't do anything wrong because Jesus will see you. And like in like a creepy or like a Santa Claus kind of way, like checking if you're naughty or nice. That's not what I mean. And I don't think anybody told me that. I think that's just how I took it because so some of you might take it that way. Don't take it that way. I'm not telling you that God is looking at you, judging you, waiting to throw down lightning bolts from heaven to punish you for wrong. I'm saying he sees you. You are seen, you are known by the creator of the universe. If you don't feel seen, if you don't feel heard, God sees you. We serve a God that's close, and I can't say that enough. If this whole series, if the only thing you get from this series is that we serve a God that's close, that's what I want you to get. At least get that God is close, that he loves you enough to step out of heaven and be with us, to create opportunity for us to spend eternity with him. We serve a God that's close, a God that sees people. Jesus took the time to stop and see her and minister to her and let her know her faith has made her well, okay? But also, Jesus as our example, I want to encourage you to stop and see people too. There are a lot of people, and honestly, I think it's gotten worse since the pandemic because I think there was a time when people were really secluded into themselves and kind of got used to that. But I think we live in a time where people don't see each other enough and where people don't feel seen. And honestly, I think a lot of the whether you want to talk about protests or riots or even just people being nasty on social media, a lot of it is for attention. A lot of it's because they're not feeling seen, they're not feeling heard. So hear people, see people, look around the room. I talked about having a support system in this room. Be that support system for somebody else. See someone, know someone. Do you know the names? I love this Wednesday night group. We got a small enough group, you can know everybody's name. If you come on Sunday, maybe you can't. There's a lot of people and maybe different people that come, but I see a lot of the same people every single week here, and it's not that many of us. Learn somebody's name. See someone. Take the time to see someone. Look them in their eyes and learn their name. Jesus took the time, with all that he had going on, with all the multitude around him, he took the time to look this woman in the eyes, to see her, to talk to her. Now, I will say real quick, Some of you might stop and talk to people too much, and you got to get on to what God has called you to do. You got like a meeting at work you got to get to, or you got stuff going on. Some of you are like real friendly, and that's fine if you're friendly, Jack. But sometimes you got work to do, so you got to keep moving. This isn't that sermon, so in this one I'm going to say stop, talk to people, see people, know people. But Kelsey's laughing too. But some of you might need to hear a little bit of just listen to the Lord. He might tell you got to keep moving and get on with what you got to do. But for me, this spoke to me. I need to stop and see people. People are the most important thing. I've talked about that plenty here. People, you're called to the people in this season in your life. You're called to these people right now. The third thing that I want to point out from this message is when Jairus' people came, and they said it was too late. And they said, she's dead. Don't bother Jesus anymore. She's gone. Is there something in your life that you think is dead? Like it's too late? Like maybe God told you something. Maybe God promised you something. Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's like a class. And you're like, I'm failing this class. It's done. I'm giving up. Maybe it's a friendship. You guys were really close, but you kind of drifted away. Or maybe something happened in that friendship, so now you're not really friends anymore, and you're just like, it's done. Maybe it's a relationship with your parents or your siblings that you think is dead, that's gone. And you're like, it's too late. I wanted Jesus to do this, and I've been praying maybe for a long time. This person Jairus came to Jesus a while ago, and you felt like maybe God took too long, and now it's too late. Now it's done. Now it's dead. I want to encourage you that it's not too late. I want to encourage you that Jesus said, do not be afraid, only believe. Said as soon as he heard that, they weren't even talking to Jesus. They were talking to Jairus, and they said, don't bother him anymore because she's already gone. And Jesus said, don't be afraid, only believe. If there's something in your life that you think it's too late, it's not too late. Do not be afraid right now. Make the decision to only believe. And I know that's tough sometimes, especially when something's gone, when it's dead. It's one thing to have the faith when she was sick, when she was dying, when things aren't looking great. But maybe you've come to a point where there's something in your life that you're like, no, it's too late. It's done. It's dead. It's not happening. It's not too late. Only have faith. Do not be afraid. Only believe. Jesus knew that it was their belief that was gonna make it happen. Like we saw with the lady just a couple verses before, he said, your faith has made you well. He knows that when you believe, your faith activates and changes things. So when you get to a point where you're like, this thing in my life is dead, and I don't know what it is for you, but when you get to that point, and then you doubt and say, no, it's dead, I'm not gonna believe anymore, that's when it truly dies, is when you stop believing. But if you continue to believe and you have faith, that's what's gonna change something. That's why Jesus said, only believe, because it is your faith that's gonna make a change. It is your faith, the action that your faith brings is going to make a difference. So don't ever lose hope, don't ever lose faith, even after you think it's dead, when you think it's gone, when you think it's too late, don't lose hope. Keep that faith. The third thing the third thing Jesus did, the fourth thing to learn from this, is Jesus kicked everybody out of the room. When Jesus gets to Jairus' house, kicks everybody out. Remember, they're all weeping, they're all sad. Jesus walks in, he brings Peter, James, and John, which I've talked about before. In the garden, those are the three that he brought with him. Talked about, remember the house that I brought? There's different levels of relationships. This is why you need people in your life that can be those three for you. You need people in your life, like I said, that can support you, that can encourage you, that can give you, that can build up your faith when you're discouraged, when you're feeling down, when you think something's dead. You don't need people in your life that are gonna continue to speak negativity, continue to make things worse, continue to maybe encourage your doubts. You have people in your life like that encourage your doubts when you're like, man, I don't know. And they're like, yeah, you're probably right. It's probably not gonna happen. You don't need those people in your life. And in that message, I'm not gonna preach the whole thing again. You can go back and watch it on YouTube. But I talked about the different levels of where people are in your life, and it's important to have important boundaries with people. You don't need that negativity in your life. And it can be tough when they're close, when they're family, when they're close friends, but you just have to keep that guard up, and you have to be careful about who you let speak into your life. Because I truly believe, we read these verses like this. We read this verse and we say, Well, Jesus had the power to raise that girl from the dead. And yes, he absolutely did. But if those other, I believe if those other people were still in the room, crying, negativity, all that stuff, I don't think it would have worked. Jesus was intentional in saying, no, these three guys, because I know they believe with me, and the father and the mother, right, I think is who went in the room with them to pray for this girl. If you're just in life in general, but especially when you're in a desperate situation, when you're in a tough situation, you really need those people in your life, and only those people in your life that are speaking faith and life into you, that are encouraging you, that are praying with you, that are helping you. The next thing is that Jesus has the power to heal. Whatever you are dealing with in your life, for however long you've been dealing with it, Jesus healed the woman. He healed the daughter, even though she was already dead, even though we thought it was over, even though this lady had tried everything else for 12 years and could not have never had any solutions, could not find a solution. God, Jesus, overcame all of that. We serve a God who is so much bigger than all of our desperate situations, so much bigger than any bad thing that can come your way. We serve a God that is absolutely powerful enough to heal a physical ailment, if you need physical healing, but mentally, emotionally, relationships, whatever is in your life that you think it's too late, it's dead, it's gone, we serve a God that heals. And even if it's a little thing, I think sometimes in the church we come after big things and we're like, if you think it's dead, God can bring it. But even in the little things, that God cares about the details. We serve a God that heals, right? And I want you to remember that. I don't want you to forget that, okay? Even if you think it's dead, even if you think it's too late, even if it's been a long time, we serve a God that heals. The last point, and this is the big one, Jesus walks, okay? If you've heard the song before, if you haven't, ignore it. It's not a Christian song necessarily. Jesus walks. Jesus does not run. Jesus was not in a hurry. Jesus was not motivated by fear, by pressure, by timing. Jesus walked. Jesus, and if you read the Gospels, if you read the Bible, Jesus was never in a hurry. Jesus walked because he understood God's timing, and he understood where he needed to be at that moment. And we live in a world right now that is so just busy. Just always, I don't know if you guys still say on my grind, but always doing something. We always got to work. If I have a dream, I got to go get it. I got to chase it, right? I got to go to school, and then I got to work, and then I got to stay up all night playing Fortnite because apparently that helps you in some way or something. But we're always doing something. We always got to go. We're always in a hurry. We're always moving. We're always trying to get to the next thing. And I read this story, and I'm like, man, Jesus should have been in a hurry. Jairus came and said, my daughter's dying. And Jesus is like, let's go. And then this lady stops to get the healing, and Jesus stops to see her, to minister to her. And Jairus has got to be like, my daughter is dying. What are you doing? But Jesus wasn't moved by outside circumstances. He wasn't concerned by what was going on around him because he knew that if he followed this pace that God had set for him, that he would get to where he needs to be when he needs to be there. And I don't know about you guys, but this is a big problem for me because I want to get there. I want to do the next thing. If I have an idea in my head, God gives me something, I'm like, let's go get it. Let's go do this. Let's go do this and this and this. If I'm not as successful as I want to be, it's because I'm not working hard enough, right? I wrote a book a while back, and I wrote this devotional book. I don't know if you guys knew about that, but I went to the Fellowship of Christian Athletes website and went to every single state and found every single staff member in Fellowship of Christian Athletes, because it's a devotional book about sports. And I sent an email to every single one of them, trying to get them to buy my book. I was like, if this is gonna be successful, it's gonna be because I did this. I put in the work. It's not gonna be my fault. I wrote a devotional book, didn't even think to God, how do you wanna do this, right? We come up with plans, and I'll say me, I do this. If you do this too, then you can relate. If you don't, then don't worry about it. But for this part, if you are the kind of person that is always gonna, I gotta work for it, I gotta do this, I gotta nonstop, that's not how God worked. That's not how God ever worked. That's not how Jesus lived his life when he was on this earth. God's timing is perfect. God doesn't just have a plan for you, but his timing for that plan is perfect. He doesn't say, hey, this is this, and if you work really hard, you can get there in 2 years, but if you're kind of lazy, take your time, then get there in 5. God had a plan already, and I say don't rush God's timing. You can't. You can't rush God's timing because it's gonna happen in his timing. It's not a coincidence that this woman was suffering for 12 years and that the girl was 12 years old. It's not a coincidence. God knew when this woman got sick and started trying all these things, and when this girl was born, God knew that in 12 years, on the very same day, they were gonna get their healing. A miraculous healing that would be recorded in 3 of the 4 Gospels that would still be read about, talked about, preached about for thousands of years later. God knew, Pastor Dustin talked about on Sunday, God's outside of time. He sees the beginning from the end. He knows exactly when this is gonna happen. And it's not luck, it's not coincidence, it's not just like, oh, if you get it now, it'll be okay, but if you get it later, it'll be better. Like, this is when it needs to happen in God's timing. This is the way that he set it up. I've talked about in this series, this Jesus coming when he did, being born in Bethlehem to Mary, was not an accident, it was not a coincidence. This was not like God was trying to get something for, God knew this was gonna happen. He knew this, he had this plan from the very beginning. The best analogy that I can think of in my head, and I apologize because it is sports, and I apologize because it also took place in 1999, but if you saw the movie, Kurt Warner's movie, American Underdog, I think it's called, that came out a couple Christmases ago, this guy did not, great movie, one of my favorite movies ever, and spoiler alert, the movie's been off for a while, also it happened 25 years ago, so if you don't know what happened, sorry. But this is someone who didn't get drafted out of college, nobody wanted him, didn't get signed by a team, waited years, finally got onto a roster in 1999 for the LA Rams, St. Louis Rams at the time, and their starting quarterback got hurt. He stepped in, was the MVP of the league, won a Super Bowl. Pretty sure still the last time that an MVP won a Super Bowl, I think, in the same year. Oh, Tell Mahomes just did it. But before that, it was the last time, 25 years ago, okay? And there's a lot to this about what he had to learn and what he had to work on and about being overlooked and all this stuff. But the point I want to make here, and the point that sticks with me, is that he needed to be on the Rams in 1999 to do this. If the Packers had signed him, they brought him to camp right out of college. If the Packers had signed him, he'd been a backup for years, never would have had this opportunity. But God, and I know this is sports, and maybe sports doesn't matter as much as your real life. I don't know. I'm sure it matters a lot to Kurt and his family that he's in the Hall of Fame now and has a broadcasting career because of this. So maybe winning the games doesn't matter, but I guarantee you his life and his family, it matters, right? And whatever you're trying to do in your career or in life, it matters to God, right? But because Kurt was on the Rams that year, they had an offensive coordinator who had an offense that was kind of unique, but worked perfect for his skill set. He had weapons around him that played the way that he knew to play and honestly kind of learned to play in the Arena League, which is a whole other thing about the time of developing, and God needs to work on you in this season, because whatever God's calling you to do that you want right now, that you're trying to hurry, you're probably not ready for anyways, and that's probably part of why it's later. But God needs you there at that moment, right? My first Wednesday back in March, when I kind of started doing every Wednesday here, I talked about kind of my story and the path that God had me on. And there's definitely been times in the last, we'll just say 15 years, but beyond that, in college and high school, where I was like frustrated with why wasn't things happening the way that I thought they were gonna happen. And I still don't know. There's a lot left of my life that I don't know yet. But I promise you, God wanted me on this stage in 2023 to speak to you guys. I think there's definitely some growth and some learning and some things, some life experience that I got before I came on the stage in 2023, in March of 2023. But there's no doubt in my mind, when I think about, especially some of you that I know better, there's no doubt in my mind that God needed me on the stage in this season right now. That I'm supposed to be in your lives right now, whether you want to believe it or not. And as you look around the people around you, it's not a coincidence that they were also born 18, 17, 16, 15 years ago, wherever. And maybe however they got to Minnesota to live in this area where they come to church here. We all have different stories of what brought us here. Some of us might be here tonight because our parents volunteer at a different part of the building, so we got to come to church. But you're here. God got you here somehow, for some way, to be here on December 20th, 2023, because he has a reason and a purpose for you. And every day of your life is planned out like that, but whatever things God has for you in the future, he has a timing for it. So don't rush it. Don't try to make it happen. I know some of you guys are seniors about to graduate, right? And you're probably like, oh, this is what I want to do. I'm going to do this. Or maybe you're like, yeah, I don't know what to do. I'm just going to do nothing for a while. Then come to the internship. I'll tell you more about that later, but we're launching the internship this fall. And me and Pastor Dustin are going to do that. So if you want to be a part of that, come talk to me. We'll get you in. You can take college credit at Southeastern University while you're here. I'm not going to do a pitch for that. But God's timing is perfect. He needs you. He has you in a place for a specific reason. And everywhere you go, he's got this timing. And we live in a life that's so rushed. And even just now, the Christmas season is the perfect time, should be the perfect time to slow down, relax, think about God, spend time with your family, understand the simplistic, our God came in a manger as a baby, very simple, still. But Christmas is the busiest time of the year. We all have so much going on. Some of it's good. We got parties and Christmas shows and outreaches, and there's so much going on. And we're buying presents for our friends and family and all this stuff, but we're just so busy. We're always just so busy in life. And it's not always bad things. Sometimes it's good things, but sometimes we're just so busy. When I think of this story, think about my friend Savan. And I talked about him a couple weeks ago. And I don't know if any of you guys knew Savan. He passed away in 2020, suddenly. And I really, after he passed, I thought a lot about his life like we do. He wasn't perfect. None of us were. None of us are perfect. But when I read this story, I see Sav as Jesus. I'm not saying he's perfect. He was perfect. But in this story, I see Sav as Jesus. And honestly, I see me as the disciples. And when I thought about that, I was like, I need to make some changes, because Savan was the kind of person that absolutely just loved people. And he might have been one of those people where, to a fault, would stop and say hi and talk to people. And it's like, but I would be the one, Sav, come on, we got to go. We got a meeting to get to. We got to do this. That was part of our relationship. I was one of those people that was trying to help him get going and do some things and maybe grow up a little bit. But as I look back at his life, it's a lot easier. And maybe, reading the story of Jesus, yeah, absolutely, it gives us a person that we can see. But I knew Savan, and I knew him well. And so it's easy for me to sometimes, again, he didn't do everything perfect, but in this situation, try to be more like Sav. When I think about the memory of Savan, I think about somebody he was always just worshiping. He was always in the presence of God. He was always seeing people. His funeral had, that's the fullest I've seen that sanctuary in years for Sav's funeral. Like and every person you talk to was like, oh yeah, he was like a brother or like a son. Like he was family to everybody, because he took the time to stop and see people, to care about people. And again, he wasn't perfect. There's definitely things where I was right to be like, Sav, we got to go to this meeting. Like, we can't stop and talk to everybody. When we were in, sorry to Leo, when I was in my wife and I lived in San Diego for a couple years. She makes fun of me because I feel like it's my whole personality now is that I lived in San Diego for 2 years. But when we lived in San Diego, Savon got to come out and see us. And we went up to LA and we're going down Venice Beach and we're just hanging out, whatever. And there's people trying to like sell stuff, trying to listen to my CD, whatever. Savon would stop and talk to everybody. I'm like, Sav, you can't do that here because everybody wants to talk to you. Everybody's trying to tell you something. You got to keep moving. Sometimes you got to just keep moving and pretend like you don't see him. Sav didn't do that. He stopped and talked to everybody. By the time he was there for a week, he had more friends in California than me and Jocelyn did because he just became friends with everybody. It's just the way he was. And literally in that story of us walking down Venice Beach, I see Jesus, and I'm like, Jesus, you can't stop and talk to every person that touches you. Like, you got to keep going. There's more stuff to do. There's more people that need you. And I see myself as the disciple trying to rush Jesus along. And Jesus is just like, just slow down. It's okay. And Jesus knew he didn't have a long time. He knew he didn't have, in this situation, because the girl was dying, but in life, he knew that he wasn't going to live a long life. He knew that he came to die on the cross. But he wasn't rushed. He was constantly just moving in God's timing. It was a message that Mike Todd did at Transformation Church back in 2018 that, I feel like I've said this every time I quote Mike Todd, but just a life-changing message, like just a really good series. And it's called Stride. And in 2017, Pastor Mike Todd and his wife had taken over the church. A couple hundred people. They had a lot of staff leave, a lot of people leave because this young guy was coming in. And one of the things he did when he took over the church was invested in cameras. He bought really nice cameras because he was like, I want to put good stuff out there. I feel like the Lord is telling me we at least need to have good videos out there, quality videos. And there's people that left the church because they spent the money on cameras. But in 2018, into 2017, he said he always prays for a word from the Lord for the church for the coming year. The word that the Lord gave him for 2018 was stride. And he was like, oh, strive. Yeah, I got it. Let's go. We're going to push. We're going to work harder. We're going to strive. God said, no, stride. And he was like, I'm not even sure what that means. Like, and he's even way more than me, high energy, like, let's go, let's do it. I'm not a high energy, but I'm definitely like a let's go kind of person. And he looked up stride. The definition of stride is walk with long, decisive steps in a specific direction. So he told his staff and his board of directors, 2018, we're going to stride. And things were starting to go pretty well, pretty good. And he said, we're going to slow down. He canceled their Christmas production for 2018. He said, we're not going to do it. We're just going to have a regular service. He canceled some speaking engagements he had coming up. He said, we're going to slow things down at work and in life. We're going to slow down. We're going to stride. We're going to walk slow, intentional steps like Jesus did in Mark 5 here. And in this, during 2018, it was early in 2018, March or February maybe, is when somebody, he doesn't even know who it was at the church, or maybe saw online one of his relationship goals messages, posted a 2-minute clip on Twitter, which he didn't even have a Twitter at the time, and people watched it, people loved it, people shared it. It got 2 million views in 2 days. And he didn't even know what was going on because he didn't have a Twitter. His Instagram went from, he had under 5,000 to he got 10,000 followers a day for the next 5 days. It just blew up, and he didn't do anything. He said he had people, other churches, consultants calling him and be like, what did you do? What did you market that your church is just blowing up and doing so good? He said, we didn't do anything. I didn't even know what was happening. He literally said he was at dinner with his wife. She was like, why is your Instagram blowing up? And he's like, what? And he looked on there and saw that he had gained 10,000 followers that day. And he was like, I don't even know what's going on. It wasn't anything he did. He had tried maybe for years to do it in his own strength and to do creative ideas like God bless Jeremiah. We work together on the social media team here at Living Word, and we come up with all sorts of stuff to try to get the algorithm, and Hannah's on our team now too, and we try to like post at the right time and what kind of content gets well and engaged. And he didn't do anything. Somebody else posted a 2-minute clip from this series, and then what happened, because people liked this clip, they went back to their YouTube channel and watched the whole series and watched the last 2 years of messages that he had high quality versions of already on YouTube, because God told him 3 years ago when he was a small church of 200 to invest in these cameras. That caused staff to leave, but this is what God told him to do, and he didn't do anything for it. 2018 was, which their YouTube channel went from, they were under 2,000 subscribers at the time. In under 45 days, they went to 100,000 subscribers. From 2,000 to 100,000 subscribers. I checked today, they're at just under 2 million subscribers. This was 2018, so not even that long ago. And by the way, throw a pandemic in there, and their church has continued to grow. Not because of, yes, Mike Todd is anointed. Yes, Mike Todd is a powerful speaker. But because in 2018, God told him to slow down and find what he called the pace of grace, where God has called you to live, not in your own struggle and your own contention, but in your pace of grace. April 2018 was, I've told the story in here before, so I'm not gonna retell the whole thing, but early in 2018, he had an opportunity to meet Stephen Furtick. He was at another church in Tulsa. He was like, this is it, I'm gonna meet Stephen Furtick. This was like, and Elevation's still doing great, so it's not like they've peaked and they're doing, but this is like peak Elevation, Stephen Furtick, and God told him, don't talk to Stephen Furtick. And the opportunity was there, he absolutely could have, he didn't, and he left that conference without Stephen Furtick ever meeting him. And he gets a call later, a couple months late, I don't know how long it was later, but he gets a call from a Charlotte area code, and it's somebody at Elevation wanting him to come speak because they saw his video on YouTube. Not because Mike Todd made it happen, but because God was working behind the scenes, and he said, if you slow down, if you find the pace of grace that I've called you to live in, he's gonna make things happen for you. It's not gonna happen in your own strength. It's great to have dreams, to have goals, to have ambitions. It's great to have a good work ethic, but it's not gonna happen because you make it happen. It's gonna happen because God's gonna make it happen in his timing. He had a quote in this where he said, if the enemy can't get in front of you to stop you, he'll get behind you and push you. Sometimes it's good stuff that we're doing, that we're busy doing, but we're so busy, and the devil can keep us so busy that we don't have time for the people in our lives, for the things that he's called us to, and we get frustrated because we do it at our own strength, and it's not working, and we don't know why, because it's not gonna happen in your own strengths. I like to say it this way, slow, intentional steps are better than running as fast as you can in the wrong direction, right? A lot of us are like, well, let me run faster, let me work harder, but God would much rather you stop, slow down, take intentional steps than running as fast as you can the other way, right? Slow, intentional steps are so much better than running as fast as you can in the wrong direction, right? God has a place for you. This pace of grace is what Pastor Mike Todd called it. And go back and watch the whole series, beginning of 2018, called Stride, I think. The whole series is fantastic, phenomenal. But it was so good, and just finding that pace, that rhythm. It's Matthew 11:28 through 30 in the Message translation, and I don't quote the Message translation very often, but this says this so well. It says, are you tired, worn out, burnt out on religion? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. I think that's the verse in other translations that say, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. God absolutely has things for you that he wants you to do. I know you're not gonna get them just sitting back. You're gonna have to step in faith and do something. But it's not gonna be on your own effort. It's not gonna be your own work, your striving that's gonna get you there. It's gonna be finding that rhythm of grace, that pace of grace that Jesus walked in his whole life. He wasn't bent out of shape about timing on whether or not he's gonna get there in time to heal this girl. He said, if I get there and she gets healed before she dies, that's fantastic. But if not, if I gotta stop and minister to this woman, then we'll just raise her from the dead when I get there. Jesus was not concerned about the outside circumstances. He lived this pace of grace where God told him to walk, how God told him to walk. Will you slow down and allow God to move in your life? Allow him to move the way that he wants to move. Will he allow him to set things up for you so that it works out better for you than if you would have done it on your own? Will you slow down enough to walk with God in these rhythms of grace and learn how he lives life? Not that there's not work to do, not that there's not things to do, but so much of us are so focused on the wrong things or working so hard on our own strength that we're not allowing God to work through us, right? So my final thought, the last thing I want you to remember, if you weren't listening, if you were asleep, wake up now for a second. Don't rush God's plan. Can't rush his timing anyways, so just slow down, be intentional with your steps, and find that pace of grace that Jesus walked in, that God wants to walk with you through life. Don't rush God's plan. Slow down, find that rhythm of grace, and allow God to work through you instead of working so hard on your own to do it yourself. Let me pray. Lord, just thank you so much for your grace, for your rhythms, for the way of life that you've called us to live, for the things that you have for us, for the timing that you have for us. Thank you, Lord, that you have a plan, that we just need to walk it out. Lord, we take time to be still, to know that you are God in this busy Christmas season. We take time to love and appreciate and understand the simplicity of our Savior when he was born in a manger, when you stepped out of heaven to be with man, to show us how to live, to show us the heart of the Father. Lord, help us to be more like you. Help us to live the way that Jesus lived when he walked this earth. Help us to slow down and be intentional with every step that we take and trust your timing. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, thank you, guys. Go learn somebody's name, play some 9 square, have some fun. See if you can beat me in basketball. I don't think you can with these shoes. I'm about to dunk on all of you, just like Anthony Edwards. It's the shoes. It's all about the shoes. Just kidding. Yes. All right, no, you can go, though, seriously. If you want.